What the heck happened to the Ford GT? What started as a car built out of pure spite to take down a racing legend turned into one of the most iconic and influential supercars of all time. This is the rundown on the Ford GT, its history, its impact, and why it had to come to an end. Let's go. Pull up a chair because the story of the GT has it all. Some corporate espionage here, some homegrown stick measuring there, and it all culminates into a good old-fashioned knockout-drag-out fight on the biggest stage in motoring, the 24-hour of Le Mans. It's the epic showdown between Ford and Ferrari, the David and Goliath drama that gave birth to one of the greatest cars ever built, the GT40. So let's take a step back to the 1960s. Enzo Ferrari's cars have been dominating the racing scene forever, but particularly at Le Mans. You know, the freaking World Cup of auto racing. Ford wanted in on the action and made an offer to buy Ferrari. And at first, it looked like the deal was actually going to come together. But at the 11th hour, which this always happens to me, Enzo Ferrari said, laughs in Ford's face and rejects the deal. Humiliated, Henry Ford II, aka the Deuce, gets pissed. He basically says, all right, Enzo, you want to play hardball? We're going to build a car that will strike you out every single time on your own turf. And the crowd went wild. Enter the Ford GT40, forged with pure American firepower and legendary engineers like none other than the Carroll Shelby. This was the birth of a revenge tour that would change racing forever. Fast forward to 1966 at Le Mans. Ferrari's ready to continue their reign, having won every single year in the 60s and pretty much wiped the floor with Ford. The GT40 surprises everybody by taking the top 3 spots, dethroning the prancing horse and making history. And they didn't stop there. Ford won Le Mans the next 4 years straight. This was David versus Goliath, but David had essentially an unlimited budget, a freaking massive engine, and an even bigger point to prove. This showed the world of racing that America had the grit, the brains, and the muscle to go toe-to-toe with the European giants. The Ford GT40 became a legend, and I think it was a big enough deal they decided to make a little movie about it. Ever heard of it? Yeah, but headed into the 70s, Ford shifted its focus away from the GT40. They had come, they had dominated, and that's kind of the end of the story. Right? Well, then this happened. The early 2000s was a very interesting time in the automotive world. Ford felt like they were falling behind building cars like this uninspiring Ford Aspire. Anyway, while the competition was outbuilding crazier, faster, and more technologically advanced exotics. At this point, Ford had been out of endurance racing since the 1960s, but internally, engineers never really gave up on the idea of building another Le Mans winning racer. Yes, there was the absolutely insane GT90, which was inspired by the original GT40, and you can go check out that story up here. It's an incredible one. And there was also the Ford Shelby GR1 concept, paying homage to Carroll Shelby and the Shelby Cobra, but neither of them ever made it out of pit lane. That is until, to celebrate Ford's 100-year anniversary, the design team showed the suits this. The blue oval decided to go back to its roots and recreate the spirit of the GT40. Although they couldn't call it a GT40 because of a trademark problem with Saphir GT40 spares. Google it. So the boys in blue went out on a limb and they called the Ferrari fighter the Ford GT. Yeah, but this wasn't just about nostalgia. It was about showing that Ford could still create a supercar that packed a punch and screamed Americana from every angle. Enter the 2005 Ford GT. Like I said, it was built to celebrate Ford's centennial in 2003. This car was designed to not only look like the GT40, but to honor its entire ethos. Ford wasn't simply making a tribute here, they were building a statement. Boy, oh boy, this one rang louder than fireworks on the 4th of July. The design of this generation's GT was almost a carbon copy of the original GT40, but bigger, badder, and built for a new era. It takes all of the iconic elements of the OG, you know, the low-slung body, the dramatic curves, and the unmistakable stance, and supercharged it. No, really, it got a big ol' sucker on top of that thing. Yeah, and it blew, because the new GT was wider, longer, and just as aggressive, and although it has a retro look, it's no retro gimmick. Every curve was reimagined with modern performance in mind. Is it just me, or does this thing look like it wants to chew up the road and spit it out at you? I mean, everything about this car screams speed and heritage. The wide rear haunches, the distinctive stripes running from nose to tail, which was actually an option when it was sold new. I mean, all this stuff though is a callback to the GT40, but underneath it all, it's a supercar built to take on Ferraris and Lamborghinis of the 2000s. Now, while Lamborghini was stuffing in big old V12s and Porsche was busy shoehorning V10 Le Mans engines under the hood, Ford kept to its Dearborn roots. The GT was powered by a 5.4-liter supercharged V8, pumping out a knock-your-top-off 550 horses. Pure attitude, pure American muscle. Just listen to this thing roar. The GT could hit 0 to 60 in 3.3, and with a top speed of 205, it was one of the fastest cars in the world. And with those dihedral doors, which could cut your head off. Ask me how I know. And also, they're kind of known as billionaire doors. It showed off literally wherever you went. The driving experience was old school fun with a contemporary twist. It had quick ratio hydraulic steering, a 6-speed manual transmission. It was as close to driving an old school race car with a modern twist as you could get. And as amazing as this car was, it was a sales failure. Yes, you could blame the $150,000 MSRP. I mean, you could blame the dealer markups, or you could just blame the brand perception because, I mean, you know, it's still just a Ford. Ultimately, they only built about 4,000 units over the 2-year period. And you know what killed it? The freaking airbag exemption didn't comply with the updated safety standards, so they couldn't build it in 2007. Man. That's exactly what happened to the Dodge Viper just 10 years later, which Carroll Shelby was also a huge part of that car's success. And at the time, it just felt like all our pets' heads are falling off. So, would Ford dare to take on this pet project one more time? Roughly 10 years later, Ford took a bold leap from old school homage to high-tech innovation. This is the groundbreaking Ford GT released in 2017, and Ford showed us that they weren't just celebrating history, they were ready to rewrite it. Unlike the second gen's nod to the nostalgia, the 2017 Ford GT was all about pushing boundaries. This was Ford saying, we're not just celebrating the past, we're going to slay the competition today, tomorrow, and in the future. They weren't just trying to replicate the GT40, they were making something futuristic, something that could dominate the present. This was a masterclass in aerodynamics and engineering. Gone were the softer retro lines of the Gen 2. Instead, the engineers of this GT wanted sharp angles with sleek, purposeful curves. It had aero elements that you could stick your freaking head through. Ask me how I know. Built around a carbon fiber monocoque. Monocoque never gets old to say. The entire car was designed to slice through the air like a missile. It looked fast, it was fast, and it was it was just pure badassery. Everything, and I mean everything, is functional. The flying buttresses aren't just for visual flair, they guide air precisely where it needs to go, reducing drag and improving stability. That active rear wing isn't just there to look cool, it adjusts based on speed and driving conditions to ensure maximum downforce, helping the car stick to the tarmac at insane speeds. Everyone agreed that this was a huge step in the right direction for Ford, except, well, the power plant. Yeah, perhaps the biggest shocker of all was what Ford did under the hood. Gone was the roaring V8, and in its place, they opted for a little 3.5-liter twin-turbocharged V6. How cute. A lot of purists, well, they were skeptical. How could a V6 possibly live up to the legacy of the GT40's 8-cylinder screamer? Well, this wasn't just any ordinary V6, producing well over 600 horsepower. It delivered blistering performance, 0 to 60 in just 3 ticks and a top speed of 216 miles per. This small displacement engine showed that you could now squeeze out supercar level performance out of a lighter, more compact package. It didn't hurt that it got better gas mileage to boot. Okay, I hear you tapping away at your screens in the comment section. Gas mileage definitely does matter in endurance racing. Okay? And the trickle-down effect of this itty-bitty engine committee was a huge marketing win for Ford. It led to the success of the EcoBoost technology that your mom probably drives, and it's now littered throughout their entire powertrain lineup. With this car, they threw tradition out the window and focused on evolution. unless we're talking out on the track. Wheel to wheel, mano a mano, 50 years after the GT40's iconic win in '66, the twin-turbo GT returned to Le Mans. And yes, you guessed it, the competition, Ferrari, came to play with their Ferrari 488 GTE. And a half a decade later, almost to the day when the checkered flag wagged, well, Ford won once again. And, well, they didn't just win, they dominated. Ford first, Ferrari second, Ford third, and fourth. This rematch, this comeback story revived the public's interest in America versus the world of motorsport, and more specifically, the Ford versus Ferrari rivalry. This Le Mans victory brought attention back to the original GT40's legacy. It led to one of the best automotive films I have ever seen, and Christian Bale gave one of the best performances being my idol, Ken Miles. This guy deserves an Emmy, or at least, an award. Anyway, the third generation did have a little bit of controversy surrounding it though. Unlike the second gen, that was a sales flop, this was the hottest ticket in town, or in the world. So much so that Ford had you apply to even be considered to buy it. And then, if you were one of the lucky few, sign a 2-year non-sale agreement. Meet John Cena, who I guess said, "Ford, you can't see me." This guy got a brand new Ford GT and he almost instantly resold it before even taking it on more than a test drive for big profit. Yeah, John paid a little over $400,000 for it in 2017, and then it sold in Monterey at auction for nearly $1 million more. The Fast and Furious and wrestling legends settled behind closed doors with Ford, paying them an undisclosed amount, but that wasn't the only door shutting, because 2023, Ford would close the door for the last time on the Ford GT. It wasn't any old GT though. Nah, this was special. It was the all-encompassing LM edition, celebrating Ford's historic 1-2-3 victory at the 24-hour Le Mans in 1966, and its GTE Pro Class victory in 2016 with the third-gen Ford GT. It's pure excess, it's pure performance, it's pure legacy. The LM was a rolling homage to one of the most storied chapters in motorsport history. So, what the heck happened to the Ford GT? It was a car forged from the fires of raw, unbridled spite that made history not one, not two, but 3 different times. And unfortunately, the world, well, it's changing. They won Le Mans with this car 50 years apart, first in the 60s and then again in 2016, beating out the most feared motorsport competitor from Italy each time. In between their Le Mans victories, it was brought back out of the blue. Get it? In the mid-2000s as a retro supercar paying homage to its elders. And yet, it was a failure. A complete sales failure that couldn't fetch MSRP, which is completely laughable now because they now fetch 3 to 4 times more than the original MSRP on the open market. And we all watched the giant toppling Ford GT drive off into the sunset in 2023. A true testament that, just like David and Goliath, even the most unlikely contender can take on the giants of the world and emerge victorious. It's a reminder that with ingenuity, determination, and a little bit of luck, legends, well, they aren't born, they're built. Built Ford tough. And that is the rundown on the Ford GT. If you enjoyed this vid, well, go subscribe and turn on that notification bell because we're bringing you fresh ones every single week. And did you know how stuff works like turbos? Well, check out this Autolab vid here. It's one of my faves. Or check out the McLaren F1 down here. It's another rundown, my absolute favorite that I've done so far. I'm Brad. This is Ideal. We'll see you next week. And promise me one thing, keep living the ideal lifestyle. Yeah.